Chef Ro here. Welcome back to our videos for Native American Heritage Month. Today we're going to make fry bread. Now this is a recipe that everybody knows and loves and associates with Native Americans, but something of note is that this is not a truly native dish. This dish came about because of colonization. And when the Native Americans were moved into camps and onto reservations, they were given rations and they had to do something with it. And that's how they came up with fry bread. Because before the Europeans came, they didn't really use wheat flour that often. They usually used corn-based flours. So this, while a very Native American dish, is not truly an authentic dish that they were making before the Europeans came. But it's very simple to make, and it's the basis of a lot of things. They make Native American tacos with it. You can just eat it, which I usually do, right? So I'm going to show you how easy it is to make. I have all of my ingredients here. This is the amount that you'll need. So in my bowl I have my flour, my baking powder, and my salt. Okay? And you do need to make sure that this water is warm or else it's not going to achieve the correct texture. So all you're going to do is you're going to stir together your dry ingredients, and you do need to have a pretty sturdy spoon here or something called a dough whisk. If you don't, then you're going to, if you just have like a silicone spatula, it's not going to be stiff enough to form this dough. So what we're going to do is we're going to slowly mix the water in, okay? We're just going to make it into a dough, okay? So you're going to get a little bit in, and then you're going to make sure that's all nice and mixed in before you move on. Now, because we live in California, sometimes you may need a little extra water, but this should be enough. Let's see. It's not very humid here, so sometimes recipes that work in other parts of the country require a little bit of extra water for it to be successful here. Okay, but I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. Okay, so you can see I've formed a dough ball here. Okay, now if your dough is a little sticky, you might need a little extra flour for the kneading process. Okay, so I've gotten my dough formed. Now we're going to knead. I have a little bit of extra flour here that I'm just sprinkling gently over my work surface. Notice I'm not coating it completely, just a little sprinkle. We can always add more. It gets really tough to take it away. Okay, all right. So I've got my dough out on my working surface here. Okay. And don't worry if you get some stuck to you. I will show you the trick to get that off in a minute. And you're going to give it a little sprinkle on top. Now, the proper way to knead is you're going to use this part of your hand right here, and you're going to take it right about in the center. It's a little sticky, give it a little more flour here, and you're going to push forward and fold. And then you're going to turn and push forward and fold. And you kind of keep picking up some of this flour on the table, and notice that I'm turning every time. Also notice I'm not going, okay, you don't want to push down, you want to push forward, okay? So it's a forward motion and fold, and give it a turn every now and then. And like I said, keep picking up some extra flour if you need it, okay? And what you're going to do is create a smooth ball. So I'm going to keep kneading this, and I'll show you exactly what it looks like when it's done. Okay, you can see that my dough ball has gotten nice and smooth, okay? And if you push it, it does bounce back. That's what you're looking for. And you guys, I was not gentle with this thing, man. Show this thing who's boss, right? Like, give it a little bit of weight or else you're never going to get done. And this took me about 5 to 10 minutes to knead, so you won't need to do arm day that day, right? But now it needs to rest because we have worked and worked and worked and worked it. And if we try and shape it now, it's just going to spring back on us. Now that my dough is kneaded though, I have all this dough on my hands, and the first thing people try and think of to do is go and wash it off, and the water is actually going to make it worse. So instead of doing that, what you do is you take a little bit of flour and rub your hands together, preferably over a trash can, and the flour will take all the dough off. Okay, and you have to add a little extra sometimes, but the flour is what will actually take all the dough off your hands, and then you can wash your hands. I'm going to put this back in my bowl. I'm going to cover it with either plastic wrap or a clean lint-free towel, and I'm going to set it somewhere kind of warm, not hot, just a little warm, and let it rise for about 30 minutes. Now there's no yeast in here for a traditional rising of bread, but the baking powder will have activated because of moisture, and so it will start to rise a bit. So in 30 minutes we'll come back and I'll show you how to shape them and fry them. Our dough's been rising for about 30 minutes now, so now it's time to move on to the next step. We're going to divide the dough, flatten it out, and cook it. So you can see my dough has grown just a little bit here. Again, the baking powder does grow on contact with moisture, so that's what's causing this to grow. And we need to divide this into 8 equal pieces. Now this should not be sticky because we had it pretty floured before, but if it's a little sticky, just kind of play with it. And I'm going to roll it into a basic log. If your log is an even thickness, then you'll be able to divide it very easily and very equally. For this, I want to do 8 pieces. So I will go in half, then I'll cut that in half, and then I'll cut each half in half. And all of a sudden, I should have 8 mostly equal pieces of dough. Then what we're going to do is you're going to just either use your hands like this or on the ground, and you're just going to roll them into a ball. I'm going to roll all these into a ball, and then I'll show you what we do next. Okay, I have all 8 of my balls lined up here, and you're just going to either pat them back and forth, kind of like a pizza dough. You can lay them flat and press them out. You can roll them out, but you're looking for about 1/4 of an inch thickness. Okay, and you want to try and get it as even as possible. You don't want it to be super thin in the center and super fat everywhere else, okay? So I just sometimes even just pat them down on the counter. I'm going to do all of these and then I'll show you what we do next. Okay, so you can see that I've got them all pressed out. Now I even pressed out some in a slightly different shape. It doesn't really matter what shape they are. The key is that it's all an even thickness. Okay. Then what you're going to want to do is you need to go and just poke a small little hole in the center of each one. You can either use a knife, you could use a straw, you just don't want them to explode. So just a tiny hole in the center of each one and you're good to go. Then we need to check our oil temperature. So you can see here in my pan that I have just enough oil to cover the bottom, and maybe 1/4 of an inch of oil. The problem with that is that you can't check the temperature of the oil with a thermometer. So you need to know if the oil is hot enough or not, because if the oil is too cold, your fry bread's just going to be greasy. If it's too hot, then it's going to burn on the outside, not cook on the inside. So you need a wood spoon. Has to be wood. Can't be plastic, can't be bamboo, can't be anything like that. Has to be wood. If you have a wood spoon and you put it in the oil, do you see? I'm going to show you from an angle. Do you see how it bubbles immediately? Okay, if it bubbles immediately, it is good to go and we can add our fry breads. I'm going to add our fry breads one at a time. Now you don't want them to touch, but you could probably get 2 of them in a skillet this size. So you want to load from the back. If it doesn't bubble like this immediately, your oil wasn't cold enough the wood was lying and you need to wait for it to get hot again, or else it'll just be greasy. Okay, so with this one, I might even be able to get 3 small ones in here at once. Okay, and you can see it's puffing up nicely. And again, you just want to make sure they don't touch. If they're touching, then there's too many in there, and it'll drop the oil temperature too much, and then you'll get, again, greasy fry bread, and we don't want that. Once your fry breads are golden brown on one side, you can flip them over to the other side, and that way we'll cook both sides. You want them to be a nice golden brown. Now sometimes you're going to have a pocket like this that just doesn't get as golden because, quite frankly, it just wasn't hitting the oil because a bubble formed, and that's okay too. Now traditionally this would have been done in lard because that's what would have come in our ration kits, but you can use vegetable oil, canola oil, you can use lard or shortening if you like. That is really up to you, and the flavor will be different depending on the fat that you use. Now most recipes tell you to put it onto a paper towel lined plate so that it soaks up the grease, but then the problem is that it sits against a paper towel the whole time that only absorbs grease from the first one, and all the rest of them just get greasy. So in my opinion, if you have a cooling rack that you can put on top of a cookie sheet or a sheet tray, that is the best way to drain these, because the fat will drain through the holes and away from the breads. Okay? You can see I'm golden brown on the other side, so I'm just going to take them out. And whichever side has the biggest pocket that the oil will pool in, for example this one, that's the side that should go down on the cookie sheet. That way it drains the best and you don't end up with soggy bread. Okay? Now you know how to make your own fry bread at home, and you know a little bit of the history of it as well. I hope you enjoy this recipe.